Pokemon is all about strategically choosing attacks to defeat the opponent, but what if we can't do that? What if we can't attack at all? You could just grind to level 100 so there's not much the opponent can do, but what if we can't do that either? Then you get this challenge. I tried to beat Pokemon Platinum without attacking and without overleveling. Here's how that went. It all started with a Piplup who immediately was forced to break the rules of this challenge. There's nothing I can do except use moves against my rival's Turtwig until we go down, so let's just use the same excuse as in Nuzlocke and say the run doesn't truly start until we get Pokeballs. That happened soon afterwards, and I desperately needed team members other than my usual starter, so I got a Starly and a Shinx. It's not like they could do something either though, so I had to grind. Which means I had to win battles. Let's talk about how I can do that. There will be quicker ways later, but right now the only option is to switch around. Eventually, the opponent will run out of power points for all of its moves and be forced to use the attack struggle, which also damages itself. Stalling the opponent can be an issue when they are constantly dealing damage, but fortunately I could find Wild Cricketot, which can't do that, so this was my way of grinding. Or well, it would have been if I wanted this challenge to take multiple decades. And I did not want that, so I used rare candies to level up my Pokemon instead. This is partially why I added the rule that I can't overlevel the next gym leader. The challenge isn't, am I patient enough to grind so much that my Pokemon basically don't take damage anymore? It is, can I use strategy to beat opponents at the same level as me while I can't use any moves? And also I don't count spamming healing items or X items as a real strategy, so using items in battle is also not allowed. That means the only viable strategy right now is waiting for the opponent to beat themselves up. Shinx does have the ability Intimidate, which drops the enemy's attack, making it easier to survive the necessary hits, but I don't even have a team of 6 yet, since I'm also not allowing myself to use multiple of the same species at once. Fortunately, after only 8 minutes, youngster Tristan Starry started struggling, and soon enough, the first trainer was defeated. The 2 other trainers on this route didn't pose a threat either, and with Jubilife City unlocked, I could catch 2 of the biggest staples of this run, Magikarp and Budew. Gyarados will become incredibly useful later on, but for now I mainly care about Budew since it has Poison Point. If an opponent makes contact with my Poison Point Pokemon, which by now already evolved into Roselia, there's a chance for it to get poisoned, meaning it will take some damage every turn. I can make this easier in trainer battles by throwing a Pokeball to waste a turn without switching, which in my opinion doesn't break the rule of using items in battle, since the Pokeball doesn't actually get used up. This let me take down my rival Starly, and although I got insanely bad luck against his Turtwig, PP stalling was still a viable strategy here, so once that was down, I could move on to Oreburgh City. There were some more Pokemon to be caught around here, and although none provided something revolutionary like Poison Point, Geodude and Onix are both amazing tanks. I did have some issues while catching Onix, so I had to walk around here for quite a while, resulting in a shiny Zubat. It wouldn't be great for the rock gym obviously, but it's still very cool. And eventually I also managed to catch the Onix I was looking for, so I could finally challenge the first gym leader, Roark. If we look at his team, there are a couple problems. Or well, basically all of his moves are a problem. Rock Throw doesn't make contact, making Poison Point useless, but it only has 15 PP, so stalling it out shouldn't be too bad, right? Wrong. Although I do have a second Intimidate Pokemon in the newly evolved Staravia, Geodude sets up Stealth Rock. This deals 1/8 of my Pokemon's max HP on switch-in as a rock move, so Staravia loses a quarter of its HP when switching in. I had this whole 3-minute long segment written down which describes how difficult this fight is because of that, but there's actually not much strategy involved and it basically just boils down to I can't switch as often, so I need bulky Pokemon. Fortunately, I have bulky Pokemon, and if I don't get too unlucky, I can tank most hits. Or I can just barely lose, which really sucked. In the end, it took over an hour of attempts to finally get a good run. I managed to wall Geodude with basically only Machop, bringing out a real problem next, Granidos. Although it does have contact moves, they are really strong contact moves, so I need at least average luck for Poison Point to activate before Roselia went down. This is a big part of why this took over an hour. But when it did activate, I simply had to wait for Poison to do its thing and wait some more until Onyx went down to struggle recoil, so then Roark was defeated and I got my first badge. That fight wasn't easy, but it was relatively straightforward and things will only get more difficult and complicated from here on out. Okay, except for Mars, she was easy. The real mini-boss of this segment was a multi-battle with Cheryl against Bugcatcher Jack and last Brianna, who somehow took longer to beat than Roark. The main issue was Brianna's Beautifly with its wide array of attacks, but eventually I got a run where Chansey landed 2 critical egg bombs to take down the demonic bug. Yeah, I don't want to talk about this fight anymore, get me out of this forest. I wasn't out of the woods just yet though, no, I'm not apologizing for that one, because then I had to take on Gardenia. You might think that Poison Point is useless here, since all her physical attacks don't make contact, but surprisingly, the special move Grass Knot does. This let me easily deal with Turtwig and Cherrim, but Roserade was a different story. Since it's a poison type, it can't be poisoned, and with its 125 base special attack stat, it shreds through my team. I thought I came well prepared with some newly caught and newly evolved Pokemon, but there was nothing I could do, so I simply needed an even better team. First on the list of new team members is Cascoon, which evolved into Dustox. It's the bulkier of the 2 Wurmple evolutions, and with its poison typing, it can't be poisoned by Roserade's poison sting either. For my other 2 team members, I turned to the Honey Trees, where I could find a Burmy and a Combee. These 2 ladies evolved into Wormadam and Vespiquen, completing my team of Pokemon that quad resist grass, plus Terravia, so it was time to get revenge on Gardenia. The MVP of this battle was easily Vespiquen. Not only does it shrug off most grass type attacks, its ability Pressure also makes it so the opponent uses up 2 PP per move instead of 1. This, plus the bulk of my other Pokemon in the back, let me successfully stall Roserade until it started struggling to its own detriment. Only Cherrim remained, so the rest of this fight was smooth sailing and we got the second badge. You might start to see a pattern here. Opponents that can be poisoned are easy, and those that can't are not. And the next Galactic Admin Jupiter has 2 poison types. Fortunately, I had earlier caught a Nosepass in Mount Coronet, which can immediately evolve there as well into Probopass. It's incredibly bulky, and as a steel type it both resists dark and is immune to poison, so that made it the perfect wall for Skuntank, letting me beat Jupiter on my first attempt. That gave me access to the bike, so I could make my way to Hearthome City. This is the home of the ghost type gym leader Fantina, and she also has multiple Pokemon that I can't poison, but I could once again beat her simply by knowing the type chart. Miss Magus was the only real threat here with the powerful combination of Shadow Ball, Psybeam and Magical Leaf, but I had prepared specific Pokemon to take each of those. Noctowl is immune to Shadow Ball and always base Psybeam, Umbreon is immune to Psybeam and mostly base Magical Leaf, and Vespiquen can take Magical Leaf quite well while then beating Shadow Ball. This cycle eventually made Miss Magus struggle itself to death, leaving Haunter which can't hit normal types, so there was a relatively easy third gym battle. Let's speed things up a bit so we can get to the more interesting part of this challenge. I could easily make my way to Veilstone City and its fighting type gym, where I challenged Maylene. Her Ace Lucario can't be poisoned because it's also part steel type, but I could easily swap Vespiquen and Gyarados back and forth to only take resisted damage while lowering his attack with Intimidate and quickly draining his PP with Pressure. Her other Pokemon can be poisoned, so yeah, I wasn't lying about speeding up, that's another badge in the pocket. Opponents were slowly getting stronger though, so I need more strategies than just Poison Point. Let's take a look at the options. Besides BP stalling, the 2 reliable ways of defeating opponents in this challenge is by inflicting them with a status condition or by using Weather. Roselia is starting to fall off a bit with its low physical defense, and there's no other Poison Point Pokemon available in Sinnoh. I could also use Flame Body to burn the opponent, but I can't get any Pokemon with that just yet. So then the other strategy is setting up Hail or Sandstorm, which at the end of every turn deals 1/16 of a Pokemon's max HP and damage to non-ice or non-steel, rock or ground types respectively. These weather conditions can either be set temporarily by using a move of the same name, or in this game permanently with an ability. And at the route after Veilstone City, there's a small cave, which has a 5% encounter rate for Hippopotas with the Sandstream ability. Sandstorm will also damage my own Pokemon, but with a level cap of 37, I could evolve a couple Pokemon such as Hippopotas into Hippowdon, and my starter into Prinplup and then Empoleon, which with its steel typing is now immune to Sandstorm. This let it safely tank a bunch of hits while Sandstorm slowly chipped away on my rival's Pokemon, and with some help from my other team members as well, I easily won the Pastoria rival fight. It doesn't solve all our problems though, as showcased against Crasher Wake. Although his Gyarados falls to poison damage, his Quagsire doesn't have any contact moves, and as a ground type, it's immune to Sandstorm damage. We don't have access to Hail yet, so that once again leaves BP stalling as the only option. Vespiquen did most of the heavy lifting here, but because it eventually weighed down, this battle suddenly got really close. Roselia barely lived the struggle, which also caused Quagsire to be poisoned, so soon afterwards only Floatzel remained. It would take 21 turns for Sandstorm to finish off Crasher Wake's ace, and my Pokemon would not survive that long. However, Roselia clutched up with a lucky Poison Point activation while going down, and this sped up the process just enough for us to barely make it out alive, getting us the 5th badge. That brings us to the errand running part of the game, and nobody cares about that, except for the part where we beat Cyrus and obtain the HM for Surf. The ability to travel across water grants us access to the Fuego Ironworks, where I can find the only Flame Body Pokemon in the game, Magmar. This will be another main team member, and it immediately proves itself in yet another battle against our rival. His team is actually good by now, so having another option for dealing damage is amazing, but it didn't make this fight a breeze either. A big part of the issue is that there's just so many Pokemon that I need to successfully burn or poison, and then there's Torterra, who can deal damage while also healing itself, forcing me to take even more hits. Because of this, I resorted to the secret 4th strategy of dealing damage, the Sticky Barb. This item deals an 1/8 of the holder's max HP and damage every turn, but it gets transferred to an opponent who hits the holder with a contact move. This gives me a much more reliable way to take down an opponent, but that's all it can do. Take down one opponent. I don't get the item back, and I can only get a single one. So instead, I decided to use a 5th even secreter strategy called Getting Lucky. I managed to burn Staraptor, Heracross, Floatzel, and Torterra all on their first hits. This eventually left just Rapidash, which I specifically played out last so I could set up the Sandstorm to slowly chip them down, while I didn't have to worry about it messing up with my plans for the other Pokemon, so I finally managed to win the Cannonlave City rival fight. Now I can save my Sticky Barb for that perfect opportunity to use it, and it definitely won't eternally remain unused in my bag. The difficulty went down a bit again with the Steel-type specialist Byron, but I'm not complaining. I could easily pivot into immunities against his Magneton, especially since I added the Ghost-type Drifblim to the team. Bastion could literally only hit me a maximum of 5 times, and Steelix fell victim to Flame Body, so that was an easy 6th gym battle. With no important interruptions at all, I could make my way through some snowy routes to Snowpoint City. I'm really waiting for the day that Game Freak randomly puts a Fire-type gym leader in a snowy town, but alas, the gym leader here specializes in Ice types. The lead Sneasel can easily be burned and stalled to death, but the other Pokemon are all problems. Piloswine constantly sets up Hail, which slowly chips away at all my team members, while its only contact move is Avalanche. I decided to get a Gliscor since Avalanche should deal triple of Stone Edge's damage against the ground flying type, but they still sometimes randomly use Stone Edge, so burning it was far from guaranteed. Abomasnow is at least a bit more consistent to deal with, but Candace has a full restore to heal a burn, so I have to trigger Flame Body against something twice, or stall with Sandstorm for even longer. I do have to eventually set up Sandstorm anyways to deal with Frostlass, since it doesn't have any contact moves and the special attacks are just too much to tank all of them. Empoleon at least quad resists Blizzard while being immune to Sandstorm damage, and Staraptor is immune to Shadow Ball while always baiting Blizzard, so this duo can put in quite a bit of work, but even stalling for 16 turns can sometimes be too much to ask. After 5 hours of trial and error, I got this incredibly close attempt. Sneasel was of course no issue, and Abomasnow got burned on a Wood Hammer, but Piloswine landed a critical hit on Magmar while the full restore hadn't been used yet. However, Magmar then clutched up with a 2 out of 2 Flame Body activation rate to eventually take Piloswine down with it, so that left just Frostlass. My overall team wasn't in the best shape, but Empoleon was still quite healthy, even with a Citrus Berry to restore even more HP, and that's all that mattered. On the penultimate turn, my starter lived on 1 HP, then tagged out the Staraptor to absorb a final hit, so Frostlass went down to Sandstorm, and we got our 7th badge. That brought me to arguably the biggest roadblock of this challenge. No, I'm not talking about the multi-battle against Mars and Jupiter. The rival just carried me through most of that battle until I had to only stall at a single Golbat, but I'm talking about the distortion world battle against Cyrus. Although all his Pokemon can theoretically be poisoned or burned, it felt impossible to put together a team of only 6 Pokemon that could counter his whole team with my current resources. And it was. That's why I modded the game so that I could use 12 Pokemon. No, I wish I did that. Instead, I spent 1.5 months to get a single item, the leftovers. This item lets the holder recover a small bit of HP at the end of every turn, which is an insane improvement over simple berries that only heal you up once per battle. The issue is obtaining it. The only way to get it before the postgame is by finding a Munchlax, which is a 1% encounter on 4 random honey trees, where you have to wait 6 hours for each encounter. There is a similar item which is more accessible, it's the Black Sludge, but it only works for poison types, so I had to resort to checking honey trees day in day out for 1.5 months until I finally found the elusive Munchlax. Which I'm never gonna use, I just wanted it for the leftovers, of course. I would have loved to procrastinate on actually tackling this fight for longer, but spending half a year to get leftovers for the rest of my team didn't sound fun either, so here goes nothing. Fortunately, the biggest threat is up first, Houndoom. The only way to take him down relatively quickly is via Poison Point, but my newly evolved Roserade is still the only available Pokemon with that ability, and it obviously gets destroyed by Flamethrower. This means I need to bait Thunderfang with Gyarados and hope for the Poison Point activation, which isn't too bad with this being Cyrus' lead, but then he uses a full restore, so I need to trigger Poison Point a second time. That required even more luck, but once it's done, I brought up my own Houndoom, which I specifically caught to absorb these Flamethrowers with Flash Fire, and then alternated with Probopass, which was holding the single leftovers to take the Dark Pulses, to eventually stall out Cyrus' first Pokemon. Luckily, his Gyarados was a lot easier to deal with. I could once again use a Mirror Match to my advantage, so once its attack was severely lowered, there wasn't much risk in setting up my Poison Point Pokemon, and he quickly went down without the use of a full restore. Honchkrow was a weird one, with 2 physical stab moves, but then 2 special coverage moves, so just repeatedly intimidating him wasn't enough here. This was the other reason I brought Houndoom. It's immune to both fire and psychic type attacks. Probopass on the other hand could tank most of the physical attacks until critical Night Slashes started ruining that plan, so I had to sack Houndoom to keep Probopass just barely healthy enough to tank the final hits. It then started looking dire when Weavile took down Roserade before Poison Point could activate, but there wasn't much that the Ice Dark type could do against Probopass after a couple intimidates. This also meant I could slowly heal back up with the leftovers while waiting for Weavile to struggle, and Crobat was even less of a threat, so I finally managed to defeat Cyrus. That leaves only a couple things on the to-do list before I can take on the Pokemon League. Catching Giratina, getting the last badge, storming through Victory Road, and beating up my rival one last time. Of all those tasks, catching Giratina was arguably the hardest one. Faulkner is almost always a pushover, and this time's no different. None of the Victory Road trainers have big enough teams to pose a threat, and I've had enough practice against my rival to make that an easy fight as well. So now I had the near impossible task of assembling a team of 6 Pokemon that can deal with all the 26 opponents we'll have to face in the Pokemon League. After a lot of deliberation, and with that I both mean consideration and deliberation of Pokemon by catching them, I settled on the following 6. Riptide the Gyarados, who has only been bad in one game across the entire franchise, and it's Pokepark Wii Pikachu's Adventure. Mountain Snack the Steelix, the best physically defensive Pokemon ever, because Red Rock is not a Pokemon, it's just the power of rocks. Harvard the Bronzong, with an IQ equal to the amount of resistances it has. It's very smart. Sensei the Tentacruel, who can heal up with a black sludge, and that's basically all it does. Scorp the Drapion, who is everything Tentacruel would want to be, and much more. And Puppy the Giratina, who is just here as an HM slave and nothing else, trust me. Now that we have a team, let's take on the Pokemon League. First up is Aron, and immediately his Yanmega is a huge threat. Fortunately, it's also the only threat on his team because all his other bug types and Drapion are physical attackers who easily get walled by leftover Steelix. Since Yanmega often uses U-turn to swap out, it always ends up being the last Pokemon to deal with, which means I can literally throw my entire team at it until it runs out of BP. It was closer than I would have liked, but once Yanmega ran out of special moves, Steelix would stall some more until the first Elite Four member was defeated. That was the easy part. Now it's time for Bertha. Her ground types are much better equipped to damage Steelix, which is why the superior steel type for this battle is Levitate Bronzong. It couldn't just completely solo the opponents though, so there was a lot of switching required here. For Whiscash, I used Gyarados Intimidated and Tentacruel to sponge some Aqua Tails, Glasgow got first out by pressure Giratina to make a run out of Fire Fang, and then by Steelix to take the other Elemental Fangs, and Golem required a careful mix of intimidating it, switching into immunities, and avoiding Sandstorm damage. Rhyperior was a bit more difficult to safely stall because of its at times unpredictable move choices, but continuing to throw my head at this wall for 1.5 hours eventually let me successfully get it to struggle, and last up was Hippowdon. Hippowdon itself isn't difficult to deal with, but it sets up permanent Sandstorm, so all my Pokemon besides Bronzong and Steelix lose a bit of their HP every turn. Still, this doesn't affect stalling out Hippowdon that much, but it's not guaranteed that Bertha will send out her ace last. I had to carefully bait out all the other mons first, and if I at any point made a small mistake with that, it could cost me another attempt. But as you can see, this time that was not an issue, so that's 2 Elite Four members down, 3 to go. So far I mainly had to deal with physical attackers, but that all changes now with the fire type specialist Flint. His lead Houndoom has 3 strong special attacks, but worst of all, it also has Sunny Day to make its flamethrower even more devastating. Fortunately, we have the best HM slave in the game, Giratina. With its dragon typing, phenomenal bulk, and pressure ability to double PP usage, it's the perfect Pokemon to deal with Flint's fire types. Houndoom's Dark Pulse was still a bit of an issue, but that's where the rest of the team comes in. Once the Dark type knocked itself out, Flareon came in, and this gave Giratina the perfect opportunity to heal back up to full with leftovers. From there it was smooth sailing with some support from Intimidate Gyarados against the Infernape and Rapidash, and basically whatever is still healthy to take hits from Magmortar, giving me a close but relatively easy 3rd win in the Pokemon League. That brings us to the last Elite Four member, Lucian. And to be completely honest, he's a joke. His lead Mr. Mime can't even land a single attack if I switch between electric and psychic immunities, and the following Bronzong can't do much either. Despite being able to boost its special attack with Calm Mind, it easily gets taken care of by the combination of the psychic immune Drapion and the levitating Bronzong. Alakazam could be a problem with its great moveset, but this is where Drapion really shines. So far it has been alright, but with its poison typing to allow for healing with Black Sludge, the dark typing for the psychic immunity, and battle armor to prevent critical hits, it puts in a lot of work here. Critical hits are a big issue in this challenge, so battle armor is a huge help and lets Drapion sponge a lot of hits here without running any risks. It can then heal up again while Alakazam only has useless moves left, so it's back at full HP when Espeon, aka Alakazam 2.0, comes out. Its wider coverage actually makes it a bit more annoying to deal with, but we were still never in any real danger, so that just leaves Gallade. The only potential issue here was Stone Edge, but once it was out of those, Drapion and Giratina easily stalled out the remaining attacks until Lucian's ace went down and the last Elite Four member was defeated. That means it's time to take on the strongest trainer of Pokemon Platinum, the champion of the Sinnoh region, Cynthia. And I immediately got destroyed by Spiritomb. Okay, I barely managed to defeat it, sure, but then I stood absolutely no chance against the rest of her team. I tried this battle a couple more times with no success, so it was clear I needed to make some changes to the team. And I knew exactly what Pokemon to get. Blissey. A lot of you probably have already been yelling at the screen that I should have started using this phenomenal special tank much earlier, but I had honestly completely forgotten about its existence. But now, it's finally its time to shine. This did mean I had to redo the entire Elite Four as well, now with Blissey instead of Tentacruel, but Tentacruel was never really important anyways, except for maybe taking some fire type attacks, which Blissey did just as well, so it didn't take long before I was back in the champion room. Now that I had a normal type on the team, Spiritomb became a lot easier to deal with. Switching between Leftovers Blissey and Blackshot Drapion made it relatively consistent to deal with. I was debating for a bit whether I should give my only leftovers to Blissey, maybe something like Giratina would use it more effectively, but no, it was definitely necessary on Blissey. It was vital in negating most of my Lodic's damage, and it even made my special tank a decent pivot against a mostly physical attacking Garchomp. But still, there's only half of Cynthia's team, and we haven't discussed the biggest threat yet, Togekiss. It's a strong special attacker with wide coverage and a lot of PP. Air Slash was its most devastating attack, and 15 of those was just too much for my team to handle. The main contenders to take these hits are Bronzong, which despite resisting flying still takes more damage than I would like, and Blissey, whose leftovers isn't enough to prevent getting chipped down either. So once again, it's back to the drawing board. This time I got some help from fellow challenge runner and content creator Y2J, who did the same challenge as me, but in Soul Silver. There will eventually be a video about that run on their YouTube channel, link is in the description. The first suggestion was using Leftovers Probopass, which was still decent against a Spiritomb and could help stalling out Togekiss, but not having Leftovers Blissey made my Lodic a huge problem again, despite putting Blackshot Tentacruel back on the team. It wasn't all in vain though. I had spent some time to find a Nosepass with a better nature, and I ended up finding a shiny Chingling. And also, Probopass wasn't the issue, I was just missing the correct support for it. The Rock Steel type is a great fusion of both Bronzong's and Steelix's best attributes, except for the ground and electric immunities. I already had Gyarados to deal with ground types, and Y2J suggested the perfect solution to cover for the other immunity, Water Absorb Quagsire. It's of course not as bulky as Steelix, but besides being immune to electric, it's also immune to water moves and gets healed up when hit by those, which is an amazing addition. This did mean I had to take on the Elite Four once again, and Bertha was actually causing me quite some trouble this time around. Gliscor's ability Hyper Cutter prevented Intimidate from dropping its attack, so it ended up dealing too much damage to my team to then still be able to beat the remaining Hippowdon. Fortunately, I had still saved up the secret force strategy, the Sticky Barb. With all the threats in the remaining fights being special attackers, this was the perfect time to use it. I just had to swap Blissey in on a contact move, and Gliscor quickly went down before being able to wreak havoc. That let me defeat Bertha, and after also defeating Flint and Lucian for hopefully the last time, it was the moment of truth. Can I finally beat Cynthia without attacking? The battle started with the familiar sight of Blissey and Drapion stalling the Spiritomb, so there's not much to say there. Garchomp was second, and Gyarados was the MVP here for sure. It could constantly swap in on Earthquakes while lowering their attack with Intimidate, so my other Pokemon could safely tank the other attacks. Some Pokemon still got quite a bit weakened here before Cynthia's ace went down, so I baited my Lodic out next. Although I've so far mainly described it as a threat, it can also be a blessing for me. It sometimes randomly goes for Mirror Coat, which only does damage if I first attack them with a special move, so that's just free healing for my leftovers Blissey. Pivoting between that and my Water Absorb Quagsire let me safely heal up, while also slowly draining their HP until they inevitably went down and Togekiss took its place. The first order of business was getting rid of its Aura Sphere PP, which I could do by swapping between Probopass and Giratina to bait Aura Sphere and Air Slash respectively. Once Togekiss couldn't use the fighting move anymore, Probopass would always bait Water Pulse or Shockwave. This meant that Quagsire was fully safe to swap in without taking damage. Sometimes I purposefully let Quagsire take an Air Slash by swapping with Blissey, since Water Pulse could heal back to full anyways. And once all the Air Slashes were used up as well, Quagsire could simply sit there until Togekiss ran out of the two remaining moves. Probopass and Blissey did both take a lot of damage in the process, but at this point only 2 Pokemon remained, with the penultimate one being Lucario. Like Melodic, this is actually another opponent I can use to heal some of my Pokemon. I just had to take 3 Stone Edges with Gardenia to get rid of the 5 PP for that move, so my Ghost type would then always bet Shadow Ball, giving Blissey the perfect opportunity to switch in and heal with leftovers. It was then just a matter of time before Lucario started to struggle, so with that taken care of, Roserade was all that stood between me and the end of this challenge. If I just make them run out of Energy Ball, I have immunities for all the remaining moves. I tried using Pressure Giratina for this, but Roserade decided to use up all of its Sludge Bombs first, so I had to throw the rest of my team at it as well. Blissey and Drapion managed to tank most of the Energy Balls, and Gyarados valiantly sacrificed itself to take one as well. Eventually, only Extra Sensor remained, and Roserade couldn't damage my Dark type any longer. After over 20 hours of attempting to beat the Pokemon League, over 50 hours of recorded footage, and over 100 hours of in-game time across 6 months of playing, Cynthia's final Pokemon struggled itself to death, meaning that I became the new Sinnoh champion, and I successfully beat Pokemon Platinum without attacking, without overleveling, and without items in battle. I loved this challenge, it was a lot of fun. With the level caps, it was at the perfect difficulty where everything was doable, but never easy and never impossible. If you also enjoyed this challenge, consider liking, subscribing, commenting and all that jazz, and maybe watch one of my other challenge runs as well. I also stream some of these challenge runs I do here on YouTube, but this one was recorded off stream. If still for some reason you want to see all the full major battles, I've uploaded an unlisted video with exactly that. It's pretty long. Have fun. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this video, I'll see you next time, and of course, stay alive.